students, and welcome to week 8 of our online English 102 mini session course. This is Professor Valerie Pell, and I'm going to go over week 8. So yes, week 8 is upon us, which means there's a handful of weeks left in our class. It's really speeding by. At this point in the semester, students will begin writing their research essay in short sections so that it's manageable. When we do this, we'll write the paper in a different sequence than you're probably accustomed to. Instead of starting with the introduction and moving all the way through the end, we're going to start with a first section in support of your thesis. Then next week, we will write the counter-argument and rebuttal section. And then after that, we'll write the second section in support of your thesis. The last portion of the papers that we'll write are going to be your title, your introduction, the background and context section, and the conclusion. So those things that begin the paper are actually we're going to write them last. We're writing this paper in a non-standard sequence to help you focus on each section of the paper, approaching each mini section of the paper almost like its own essay. I find that writers, including myself, often have to significantly rewrite their titles, introductions, backgrounds, and/or conclusions when they write them in the standard order of starting at the beginning and writing all the way to the end, because their papers often have a mind of their own and end up taking detours and different paths than one anticipated. And I find that it's really easy to get hung up on trying to come up with a really catchy title or attention grabber. And then what ends up happening is you don't actually use that one because it doesn't work with where your paper actually goes. So rather than get hung up on that, I want us to dive right into the body of your paper. And by writing your paper out of order, so to speak, this allows you to sidestep all of those other challenges where you might get hung up or stuck. Okay, so you might be kind of nervous when I say this, but by the end of the semester, you're going to be so happy that I gave you this technique and that you tried this technique. Every student has always said that this has really helped them attack this larger paper because they can see it in these distinct sections and approach it one section at a time. Okay, so let's get into specifically what we're doing this week. Like all weeks, we'll begin with the activity schedule to see what it is that we should be doing. Okay, let's go down to week 8. Here we are. You're already watching the week 8 overview. That's great. Then in They Say, I Say, read chapters 6 and 10. Then watch on YouTube the MLA direct source quote lecture. And then also in the reading section of content, so go to content and the readings, read the handout titled Counter-Argument, Counter-Evidence, Concessions, and Rebuttals. Then for this week, we have a few different graded activities that we need to work on. The first is the addressing counter-argument discussion. Okay, so we haven't had a discussion in a couple of weeks, so let's put our discussion caps back on and make sure that you read that section, that handout in the content area of Brightspace, the counter-arguments, counter-evidence, concessions, and rebuttals. And then you're going to create a main post. Label your post, main post, remember that. And don't retype the questions, just type the number and then your answer. Okay, so you're going to read and evaluate the following paragraph as an example of counter-argument, counter-evidence, and rebuttals. How effective is it? What strengths and weaknesses does the paragraph have? Does it seem to have anything missing? And what could make it more effective? Okay, so you'll read Vivi's counter-argument and then answer those questions for number 1. Then for number 2, you'll label it number 2 and you'll read Hannah's counter-argument paragraph and answer those questions for number 2 in a full paragraph. And then for number 3, you will read Jasmine's counter-argument paragraph and read and evaluate those questions in its own paragraph for number 3. And then you're going to read this last one. Okay, and you have some different questions here where it's asking you to examine the main claim, the evidence for the main claim, the counter argument, counter evidence, rebuttal, or response. And I want you to go through letters A through D, see how those sentences are labeled here, and identify which part or which move, rhetorical move is being made. Is it the main claim, the counter argument, counter evidence, rebuttal, or response? Okay, and then you need to have two main post replies to your peers, um, looking at their responses and seeing if you agree or disagree and why. Okay, these are general responses, but make sure that they are fully developed and that you respond to each area of your peers' main post. So you should have 4 paragraphs in. Okay, so the big thing this week is working on your draft of your paper. Okay, so a couple things about this partial draft. Now, this is a partial draft, not the whole draft, just a partial draft. Okay, so format your paper according to the mandatory paper formatting guide. Particularly, use Courier New 12-point font and double space. Begin your paper with your student and activity information, which has your name, the course with section, the date, and the activity name. And then start a new line and write the essay's counter argument, like you did with your outline last week. And then on a new line, write, label and state your essay's thesis. Then on a new line, create the heading. I want a heading that says first thesis support section. And then on a new line, and then with multiple paragraphs, compose the first section of your research paper, which should support your topic claim and the first reason of your support. This section of your paper should be multiple paragraphs and range in page length from about 1.5 to 2.5 pages. It should synthesize multiple sources from your research and integrate that research using MLA in text citations. It should keep the claim of the thesis well in focus. And then when you're done with that section of your paper, insert a page break and then include your MLA Works Cited page for the sources that you cited just in the body of your paper. So make sure as we continue writing these drafts, make sure that you are adding back in the works cited that you have for those particular portions of your paper. Okay, if you haven't done so yet, make your writing center or writing lab appointment. I want you to have an appointment with one of the writing center or writing labs. Those are different than the tutoring center because they're staffed by faculty. And you may end up having a virtual appointment, or maybe later in the semester you might have a face-to-face appointment. I don't care if it's virtual or face-to-face, so long as you have at least one appointment. If you go multiple times to the writing center for multiple visits on your drafts between now and the end of the semester, you will receive extra credit. Just make sure that when you go to those appointments that you take a screenshot of grades first where it says about your appointment, what you did in your appointment, or take a picture, a snapshot with your camera and upload the image of the little piece of paper that was filled out by the Writing Center consultant, proving that you had the appointment. Going to these appointments, students often drag their feet. They think it's not worth their time or their energy. But again, students every semester say that this was the most valuable or second valuable thing. Learning to write the paper in short sections out of order is usually the most valuable thing. And then the second most valuable thing is going and getting help one-on-one with one of the Writing Center consultants. So don't put this off. And I give a lot of extra credit if you go multiple times. So, it's not a bad idea for you to use that feedback. Sometimes the feedback and help you can get from the Writing Center will save you hours and hours of time on your own. And I know we're all super busy, and I want you to save time and headache as well. Okay, so the last thing this week is your quiz for week 8. So be sure to take that. And that's it for this week, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm always here to help. Have a wonderful